Welcome back to another episode of SuckcessFull, the podcast.
I'm one of your hosts, Blake, and joining me,
I'm one of your other hosts, Justin.
And this is the podcast all about the not-so-subtle truth about success and
the art of sucking less in pursuit of it. Let's not waste any more time and get right to the show.
I keep laughing because Zoom keeps cutting out Justin's hair. And so I told him he should stick his head closer to the cactus. Maybe it'll make up for the loss of pointiness that his hair usually does. Because for those of you who haven't seen Justin, his hair does this like swoosh thing all on its own. It's pretty
And it's
badass.
true. The cactus, the only thing I don't like about it, though, it has kind of like a buckwheat thing going for it. It's got hair going everywhere and it doesn't just go straight up. So I did have a call today with an old buddy and they were so funny. They're like, it's so funny. Your hair has stayed the exact same for like 5 years. Like it hasn't changed at all. And I'm like, it's changed a little bit. And they were like, we spent like 10 minutes in the call talking about my hair. I'm like, all right, we got to get on to something else now.
That is funny. And you don't put anything in it, right?
I did today, a tiny bit, but most of the time, no.
Did it do that when you were a kid too?
No, when I was a kid, I had like a massive cowlick and it would stand up in the back. So I had like a couple of hairs that stood up in the back and my hair was like flat on my head. This, I'd say probably junior high school, it kind of changed and it would just literally just pop up on its own. It was crazy.
That's funny. When I moved to Los Angeles, I actually cut my hair. I had a pixie cut and I had the same problem. I had a cowlick in the back of my head and I used to have to try to like push it down and my hair's like curly and stubborn. Yeah, it was a lot of maintenance that didn't last very long.
Well, my brother has two cowlicks. He's got like one on each side of his head. And I don't know how he combs, like how he does it, but it never sticks up. But he's got two and they're like literally like a straight line from each other, maybe like an inch or two apart. It's the weirdest thing. And he's got his hair really short. So you can tell it's really crazy.
Huh, that's interesting. I think my sister has that actually.
It's weird. See, siblings, they get less genes in the first round. So I think we get the best. As you go further down the food chain, it just something happens, I think.
Are you the oldest?
Absolutely.
I figured. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. The oldest, the best, whatever you want to call it. Yes.
We'll go with that. I claim this. Yes.
It's funny because like we've got three kids and everyone thinks that they fit a certain personality type when they watch a TikTok video or whatever, which is kind of true. All kids eventually like they'll take on different traits based on who's around. It's kind of fun to watch.
I think that's kind of everybody, though, a little bit.
That's what I'm saying. So it's hard to put everyone into a box. But I think the one truism, though, is that the oldest is usually, more successful, happier, better off, just a better person overall. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I would say that's fair.
Which I think leads us beautifully into successful. How are you, Blake?
I'm doing well, except that I am in a new location, or our audience can't see that, but my router decided to crap out. They gave me a new one at my apartment complex, and it has not been fixed yet. So
that is obnoxious. I got to tell you, I don't know, like right before we got started here, I froze at one point. So I had to go check my router. So today, fingers crossed, we have no issues.
Hopefully we don't freeze or cut out. We'll be like,
I always hate the one where you're like, like,
oh, yeah, you got the derpy face. Yeah,
exactly. The derpy. I love that. Yes. The derpy. Yes. That's great. Or if my hair just disappears entirely and it just looks like a cactus. None of it's good. So I think today's conversation is so poignant, so appropriate. And I think something that we're going to keep having to talk about the rest of our lives in some capacity. And it's AI. I think today what we're going to really dive into is talking about how to use it. What we're trying to do, what we talked about offline was making it less scary for people, because I've run across people that are executives and they don't really use it and don't see a use for it. I've run into people that are small businesses that are just chomping at the bit to use it. And I've run into other people that are terrified of it. And so I think what we talked about yesterday before, as we were planning for today, was trying to get past being scared of it, get past the not knowing what it is, talk about what it is and how to utilize it better. Is that fair?
Oh, 100%. And I think it's such a vital change because it's going to be around. It's not going anywhere. If anything, it's going to keep, as you like to say, iterating on itself.
Well, and that's the crazy thing. So I'll kick it off briefly here with yesterday. There was a great article in the New York Times, basically from the father of AI. He quit his job at Google. He officially announced it last week because he was afraid of what he'd created. His point was, if we stop now, it's probably done its job. It's great. But like most things in humanity, you can't stop. You're going to keep making things better and better. And his fear was not that it's going to just replace jobs and everything else like that, but that it's already to the point where it's smarter than people in a lot of ways, like the way it logically links things. And he was afraid that eventually we would never be able to tell the difference between truth and falsehood.
Huh. Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess ultimately, regardless of whether it's artificial intelligence or something else, they say that your perceived reality is all in your mind anyway. So what is reality?
Oh, I mean, okay. For those that heard our last episode, there was a knowledge bomb drop. I think we need another one here. And I got to tell you, you're going to you have to change your name to Blake Bomb Drop. You just have to. You absolutely have to, because you drop these wonderful things, these little nuggets we can chew on all day that are badass. So yes, I think it's interesting. And no, I'm not afraid of that fact either, because like you're talking about, what you perceive is your reality. What I perceive is different than yours, etc. And what I think is neat about AI, though, that it does do is it gives us the opportunity to reimagine almost everything that we do, period. Not only the concept of work, but how we work, how we relate to each other, what we actually deem as work, all these different things. I think that's the exciting part. And the part that I think is so crazy is how fast this has happened. I mean, you and I were talking for, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks prior to this, just starting to explore this. That's how new this is. And yet in the last 3 weeks alone, I mean, just think about how much it's already changed in 3 weeks.
Other than what we've even talked about, there's been additional artificial intelligence software that has either just come out or is just hitting, I guess, mainstream. And it's changing so many different aspects of multiple industries. And it's been very interesting because my friend sent me a video the other day. I think it was like a TikTok or something. And they were talking about these different softwares. And one of them creates entire images. The whole thing started because it shows this image of this woman that looks very like a magazine cover. It looks real and everything. And they were like, is this real or is this artificial intelligence? And they were like, I bet you can't guess that it was artificial intelligence. This isn't a real model, da 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 da. And apparently the software, you like type in exactly what you want to see. It creates images that look like real people in real photography. So there's a lot of companies, especially online companies, that are just starting out that can't afford models and things like that for their clothing lines, that are using this technology to essentially create a model, and then they're photoshopping their items onto them.
See, that's crazy. And I think that AI is this buzzword right now. Back when the internet was just starting, everyone didn't know how to use the net. So they'd go on the net and then they were, they dabble with it and then kind of back off. And then they'd get into it. And then the first ones like Amazon and others that dove into it crushed it eventually because they were easy, early adopters, everything else. Well, my theory on AI is it's going to be hot for at least another decade or so, and then maybe someone else that replaces it. But I think there's going to be things like you're talking about here, where there's going to be a leap on this and say, okay, I really want to use this technology to make images, that kind of thing. But I think there's also going to be like a nostalgic side at some point where people go, you know what, I kind of want the real thing again. I think it'll be a balance eventually, but I think this tipping of the boat, it's so funny because the web service that we use, what was it, last week, came out with artificial intelligence on everything, and it just dropped like overnight. It was crazy.
Yeah, they didn't even give us any indication they were doing that. They were just like, oh, by the way.
And it's going to be awesome. And they had to basically record a video to walk you through it. And I think it's neat that they're taking advantage of the stuff that's going to be helpful, to help like write blogs, to help maximize email lists, help with all those things that are difficult to do. That's unbelievably awesome. And I think that that's the stuff that people need to jump on the train with. The part that I think is funny is that, I don't know if you've run into this, there's people that are all in this camp that like all they want to do is talk AI. And then there's other people that are afraid of it. There's very few that are kind of this middle of the road, kind of say, let's take advantage of it and see where it takes us. What's your perspective?
I agree with you. Everybody that I've talked to is either super into it or is terrified of it. But I think that kind of is the same with any new thing. I mean, cars at one point weren't a thing and they were probably like, what is this contraption? You know what I mean? And now they're everywhere. So same with the internet. I remember when I was growing up, and this is going to really like show my age here, but when I was growing up, we had those huge, fat, heavy monitors and computers, and they had to teach you how to type. And I remember they were just so old. I remember they had these little sharks that you were supposed to like hit the key buttons before the shark eats you, essentially, because you were learning to type. And it was just so old. And you look back on it now and I'm recording this on a laptop that has full editing capabilities and M1 chips and all sorts of stuff. And it's tiny. But back then, I mean, I remember the entire computer room used to get so hot from all the computers that they had to leave the doors open and stuff because it was so hot in there from all the equipment.
You're totally right. That's what I remember. And so because I'm just slightly older than you, I remember everything you're saying, but I also remember back in the day when you had gigantic, like 3x5 floppy disks and you'd put them in.
Oh, yeah. You used to have to buy the floppy disks at the library so that you could move things around. And then you had those like USB drive things. And I remember, I think it was when I was in high school, was around the time when those were more of a thing. And we had to start keeping things on our little USB drive so that we could turn in projects and stuff for our computer class.
And now it's all in the cloud. And I guess that like this conversation here for me is also helpful to work through this whole thing, because one of the fun parts about disruptive things that people get afraid of or jump on the bandwagon or kind of neutral on is they always create more opportunity. They always have since the beginning of time. Whether you talked about Henry Ford, people were terrified. Like what happens to all the people that own horses? What happens all like you adapt, and it all of a sudden created a ton of new jobs and a new industry and all these new things. And so I think one of the cool parts about this is to see where it goes, because we don't know. I mean, even coding jobs, I read yesterday that a lot of people are going to these services and saying, hey, create me some Python code that does this, and it'll do it. You don't need coders anymore.
Yeah. And that's been interesting too. And I think it really does come down to your perspective on it and your mindset and the way that you choose to go about it. And I think there's a fine line between jumping onto something that's a fad that's going to like quickly come in, quickly leave. But this is very clearly not one of those things. And so really it's about adapting to that aspect of it and learning how to use it to your advantage and like using it in ways that other people are not using it. And I think that's part of the whole, I guess, excitement though, if you look at it from that perspective, because there's so many different things you can use it for. I mean, yesterday I was writing in my book and I was like, what is this word I'm trying to think of? And I had chat I can't that whatever. I can't ever remember. But anyways, it was open and I was like, So I typed in, I was like, what is the word that means this, but isn't this? And it was like, oh, it could be these three things. And I was like, yes, it's that one. But it's just like, I mean, even when I'm doing content, if I need a summary of this video, I put the transcript in there and it'll give me down to the word count or even the character count what the summary is. It just saves a lot of time. And I think that even though people are scared to use this stuff because they think it's going to lose jobs and there's going to be a lack of job security, and to a certain extent that's true. However, there's going to be new opportunities as well, because none of these things are completely like foolproof. You don't have to edit it and it's just good to go. And a great example of that is I found this new software where you put your video in and it cuts all the pauses out of your video. And most of those are not doing a good job. This one is almost so good that you don't really have to do too much to it. But what's cool about it is it actually now is so smart that you can put in multiple camera angles, and it's supposed to be able to cut all the different camera angles and everything to like a podcast. So I haven't used that part of it yet because I haven't quite figured out the technical end of it, but it's largely user friendly. And it, at least for the jump cutting one, where it cuts the pauses out, it's done a pretty good job. Now, it's not perfect though. I still have to go in and check. And Rob and I were having this conversation, my friend who's also in film, because we've been producing partners for years. And we were talking about that particular program because everyone in the industry is freaking out and saying, oh, there's not going to be editors anymore. No, not really, because editing, just like Photoshop and these other things, are still an art. So even if AI becomes a mainstream thing, there's going to be people who are going to figure out ways of using it that other people aren't using it that way. And if you can be one of those people and lead the trend instead of following it, then you're just one up in the competition when it comes to your business.
100%. And I think that we'll keep with the theme of entertainment here, because there's another great example of it. So like the writers went on strike today, right?
Oh,
so
that finally happened.
Officially they did.
Ooh,
they're
wow,
on strike. Okay. And one of their sticking points was that they wanted a guarantee that AI could not be used. Back to your point of thinking about editing, there's a lot of mundane pieces of editing that suck. The art of it really comes into how do you splice it? What do you keep? What don't you? But getting rid of pauses and stuff, no one likes doing. Like, I mean, that's not really, it's not a good use of time. So that's a great use of getting rid of that stuff. I think what they're missing the point of on both sides of this is that the opportunity it creates. If you fight AI, you're going to lose that battle because it changes too many things. But if you adapt to it and say, look, we'll accept AI, but we also want people involved too. So maybe it's a 50-50 or whatever. Like you do some sort of work out there. In terms of editing, what I think is being not discussed is what's next for editing. So like editing is such a big field. What else can you do with this now? So now I don't have to do this. Okay, now I can really focus on sound or, whatever it is, like cool angles or totally new techniques or anything like that. This could really revolutionize the industry.
It can really give you the ability to be more creative by getting rid of those mundane things. And
Exactly.
so, I mean, even just with the cutting out the pauses part, I mean, it saved me probably for the one thing I was doing, because I just found out about this week, actually. So it was your blog. Actually, I put it in there and I was like, all right, let's see if this works. So I was very skeptical because most of them are not that great. They cut off like mid sentences and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I was stunned. What would have taken me probably an hour to do just for the base edit, it did in literally not even a minute. Like, I'm telling you, it literally shows you on the timeline. It's like da 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 da, and it just like cuts it, and it's like, and it's done. And I was like, oh yeah, right. And Rob was with me, and we're sitting down, and he's like, I'm gonna watch this. Like, that's BS. There's no way. We clicked the button, and we were like, holy crap! It was almost flawless. Now, that was just the pauses and stuff. So of course I said it's not perfect. I went in and I fixed a couple things, but like the amount of time it saved me was crazy. So now instead of me spending that hour trying to cut the pauses out, I'm spending an hour moving stuff around and doing, cutting in, cutting out, adding sound effects, whatever. I think people are missing that part of it. And it's the same with my writing stuff, trying to figure out words or like, would this make sense? Because I'm writing a science fiction book right now. So instead of trying to sit there and research 50 billion things of like, how does nanotechnology work? Da, 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 da. I typed in some questions and it gave me a summary of, okay, well, this could be realistic because A, B, and C, or no, because of A, B, and C. That was so much time. I mean, normally you would have to have an entire dedicated day to that stuff. And so I think people are missing that point of, yeah, there's going to be certain jobs that may go away, but there's also going to be new jobs. And then, like you said, with the nostalgia, I mean, there's plenty of photographers and cinematographers who still shoot on film. It's not going away. And now it's even more of a like, ooh, that's so artsy.
Let's all sit around the campfire, pop some Molly, and talk. Yes, totally. That's exactly what it is. Yes. I think you summarized it beautifully there. It's not only the opportunity piece of it, but it's also the earlier you adopt this stuff, the more you understand how it works so that you're able to be ahead of other people. I think we also forget that too, because by the time everyone else is using this, for instance, think about your editing tool. They probably spent years getting there, but then think about what they're going to do next. So if you're already using it for this and have found a good use of it, you're not going to be afraid for what's next. You're going to be excited. But if you jump on the bandwagon 3-4 iterations from now, and you're just blown away by how powerful it is, it's intimidating and scary for anything like this. Things that aren't going away. Like once the genie's out of the lamp, and this is out of the lamp, like you cannot put AI because now it's proliferating all over the place. You can't put it back in the bottle. So what do? Figure out how to use it. And guess what? We were talking offline prior to this. Should we mention some of the services that are out there? We talked about it off and on, and we don't know if we're going to keep it in or not, but we're going to, start diving into this. But it's interesting because the way you can use them. So like, is one perfect? No, but I found that like, for instance, the other day, I was running into the same thing. I was looking for a word to use for a presentation I was putting together, and I kept getting stuck. And so I went to ChatGPT, and it wrote me this whole thing on basically, I asked for 5 words and they were close, but they were synonyms, but not exact. I went to Microsoft Edge. It nailed it. Like it was perfect. It was great right out of the bat. And so I think understanding the pros and cons of each one a little bit, because they all have their strengths, they all have their weaknesses. But if you rely on one solely, I think you're going to miss the movement that's going on because it's going to be in everything. But if you get attached, like for instance, if you love Google and you only use Bard, well, I mean, there's no guarantee that Bard will be around forever. So understanding all these different technologies, how to use them, where their strengths are, where the weaknesses are, I think is going to help you.
I agree with you 100%. I think that's the same as for businesses. They always say you shouldn't just stick to one social media. Same for content creators. You don't stick to one social media. It's the same thing for this. Even in an industry like film, where there's like Adobe Premiere is the standard editing software, or whatever is the standard this or that, there's still additional programs out there that you can use that are still acceptable or even still considered correct. So I think it's really about learning which one works for your purposes the best and figuring out how to use that to your advantage. Because I've done the same thing. And I've also realized too, that certain, like I'll go to one for one thing and it does really well, but then like some of the other ones don't do as well with that. Or across the board, when I was trying to write something that was like a bio, it actually did not that great on any of them. They were super cheesy and cliche and very just like, if I would have posted that, I would have sounded like an asshole filmmaker who was up my own ass.
Well, let's be fair. Sometimes you are, though.
Sliced bread.
I wish I'd shot this in 8mm. Shut up. Yes. And I think that's the beauty of this, though, is like, at least now you know, right? Because playing with this early is great. And like today, I didn't know this. Got up a meeting and I ran inside to fill up my tea, and I burped really loud. And Kelly was on the phone and I didn't know she was on the phone. And there was like a long pause. And I yelled out, "That's how you know it's not AI." And everyone started laughing.
That's funny.
But it was one of those, like, you know, even start making jokes about it, because the more comfortable with it you are, the easier it is to adapt to, and you'll find uses for it. You'll get comfortable with it. So then you find new ways to use it that other people aren't, and you can take advantage of that. Like, for instance, I've never coded. That's not true. In high school, I had to take coding, but I didn't enjoy it at all. I've hated coding. I never found a use for it. But I'd love to have a program that said, hey, if I could do this and plug it somewhere and did it for me, that's awesome. Then I don't have to pay anyone else to do it. I can do it myself and be much more independent and even more creative, which I think is where we're all going with this. And I think that's what scares some people. You and I are both very creative people. At the end of the day, if we could just sit and create all day, that would be awesome. Most people that I've run into love structure. They love the idea of A plus B equals C. And I do that every day. I show up at 8, I eat lunch at 11:30. I leave at 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They love the routine. They love the structure. They love the linearity of it. And I think what's going to be really disruptive is that a lot of those people, it's not so much the jobs, everything else they're going to change, and that will be part of it, but it's also going to be your acceptance of what's acceptable and what's not is going to change.
I'm digesting that for a second because, yeah, I agree with you.
So I was thinking of like a mutual person that we both know, and she is very A plus B equals C. Like, there's no gray area. Everything's black and white out there. And it's very funny because I can already tell with AI, like, she's very scared of it. She's very apprehensive to use it. Even when we were posting on social media, I said, "Oh, plug it in there." She was like, she's reticent to do it. And I'm just like, just do it. Take advantage of it. It's new. It's not scary. Jump on board.
I think the thing about change and about growth, though, is you can't change and have growth if you're not going somewhere you haven't been before. There's going to be a level of uncomfortability to that. And actually, it was funny. My mom and I were talking about this the other day because we forgot. Now you're so used to having your iPhone, your Apple Watch, your computer, everything just syncs together. You're so used to having your phone on you all the time. You're so used to being so connected. And I was talking about something that happened in my childhood, and my mom was like, "Yeah, but remember, there weren't cell phones and stuff back then like we have now." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's why that was handled that way." I think you forget how different things already have been in your life, that you think that this thing's going to be so different from that. But like, think of how much has already changed since you were a child. And now phones are just, everyone has a cell phone. Even older people who don't want to be on the internet and whatever have iPhones. So, that being said, eventually it becomes every day, that structure like you're talking about. But it's that transitional period, right? That's like uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And I think, the example is great. And I would say that, like, if you think about the Pareto principle, the 80-20 thing, right? When I used to give presentations, I used to say 80% of the people I don't ever pay attention to in the audience, because there's 10% that are going to root for me. And then there's 10% that are never going to like me. No matter what I do, they're never going to like me. But that 80%, I have a chance of winning over. So I would do and kind of cater more broadly and dependent and see what they were doing. And eventually I pay more and more attention to them based on what was working and what wasn't. And I think it's the same thing with technology here, that there's going to be 10% of the people that are just going to, like my grandmother. I know this for a fact. She has an AOL account, like all that kind of stuff. Like, she's super old school. She has web TV, which I don't even know is a thing anymore. Like, she doesn't have a computer. It's a computer that hooks up to your TV. It's it's a web
Oh, okay. I
TV.
was like, I don't even know what that is.
I've never seen it, but like apparently it's a key like a keyboard, and I don't know if it's USB or if it's Bluetooth or whatever. It connects to your TV, and you use your TV as a computer. So I'm assuming the keyboard has a hard drive, everything else in it. But it was so funny because she's even admitted, she goes, "That's as much technology as I need in my life," and I'm like, well, that's that's what you want to hear, right? Like, wouldn't you love to go to your doctor and hear that? Listen, I'm done with tech. I've maxed out. This is all the technology I need right now. This is all I can do to save you. This is it. There may be new technology, but guess what? I'm not your person for that.
Oh
What?
gosh, that would be scary.
It'd be terrifying. And I think that's the analogy I was talking with one of my clients yesterday that was kind of apprehensive about this. That's exactly what I said. I said, look, if you get on the bandwagon early, you realize you get more skill set. And you talked about growth earlier. You get more growth, you get more opportunity. And guess what? Is it going to suck and be hard eventually or at first? Yeah, that's part of the process. But guess what? You're going to have that learning curve faster than anyone else because you're doing it before everyone else. So when everyone else is trying to figure out what's going on, you're going to be in there. And I said, look, if your doctor ever came to you and said, look, there is a cure that they have found in this distant land and I can order it, but the mail just is too slow for me. I just don't want to use the mail system. I can't. What would you do? You'd find a new doctor. You get the hell out of there, right? And I think that's the same thing with this whole technology AI thing that's going on here. You can fight this. Absolutely. That's your prerogative. You can do all that. Will it work out for you in the end? 100% no. You can comment below if you disagree. Please do that. I'm just going to bet now that if you fight this trend, you're in a losing battle.
Well, I was going to say this might be a little controversial, but I would argue that AI is kind of evening the playing field a little bit. So, these marketing and like social media trends and all that, like you always had to hire a specialist. A lot of small businesses can't afford to do that. And especially with the way the economy is right now and the way that politics are right now with trying to, boost these huge companies and shit on the smaller ones. I mean, yeah, some of these smaller companies now are getting a leg up where you would have to have a major company and 5 specialists to do half of this stuff. And I would still argue, though, it's not that you're taking the specialist's job away. These are often clients that those specialists aren't going to take on anyways, because they're not going to pay enough for that specialist to want to stay there. So if anything, we're evening that out a little bit. We're giving other small businesses and creators the ability to have some of these useful tools to start getting a leg up so that they can start moving up and still moving on with their goals and their dreams. But the specialists and stuff are still going to be there because there's going to be a specialist of how you type things into the AI thing. You get what I'm saying? It's like there's going to be new ways that those specialists are going to still have that leg up. They're not going to go away.
And no, I think you're looking at it wonderfully. And one piece that I guess I hadn't even thought about until you just said it right now that I think is awesome is one thing that we forget about big companies is they're slow. Even Google, when you've got 100,000 people that work there, you may be on the cutting edge of AI, right? But to make radical decisions has to go through a whole hierarchy of people. Small companies don't have to do that. So when you talk about the advantage too, it tips the playing field in a positive way for smaller companies because they can be more agile, truly play on a competitive landscape, charge less, and actually at the end of the day, maybe even deliver a better product.
Yep. And then with all of those tools and things, then you're able to level up where you can afford those higher tier specialists to go in and do more specific things. And that's the thing too, is like a great example of this is the other day, Rob and I were trying to come up with a logo because we needed it for something and we didn't have time to design it ourselves. So we were like, oh, let's try this AI thing. So we were like, give me a turtle who's holding a camera, like a video camera. And it gave us a turtle that was made out of a camera. It gave us a cat that was inside a turtle shell. It gave us like all these random things that did not remotely line up with what we asked for. And I think that's a perfect example of the fact that like this stuff is not perfect. It's not going to just take over everything all of a sudden. Like it's not going. I mean, even at the pace it's going, when you need those specific things, you're still going to have to hire that specialist, or you're going to have the tools and the know-how to do it yourself. We were being lazy. We were like, let's see if we can move this up, but it didn't work.
I would challenge that though. You're not being lazy. You're being creative. You're trying to use the tools that you have at your ability. And
that's true. I guess I was just being goofy.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're experimenting, right?
Yeah.
You're trying new things and in a fun way. And I think that is, I actually want to talk about that word for a second here. I think people are also afraid of that it's lazy. right? Because especially in the West, when we grew up in the United States, there's this whole belief, which again, please comment on this, I think is so stupid, is that you have to work hard your entire life. That is
Oh
dumb.
my
You
gosh,
have to
this
work.
brings us to a whole different thing. Yes, I agree.
Exactly. You have to work smart. You have to be effective, and you've got to be in demand for what you're doing. Those are the skill sets. Working hard, like I've had so many bosses that would be in like at 6 a.m. and leave at 7 p.m. And I'm like, you work 13-hour days. Like, what is that for? What are you actually doing for yourself? Is it making you a better person? Are you actually being a strong leader? Are you providing for your team? Are you there for your family? Are you there for your friends? What's your social life? You know, you're sleeping well, all those things that really matter at the end of the day. And I think that AI is giving us a new way to think about work and to realize that, like, look, the version of what we thought it was in the 50s, okay, because our concept of work as we know it today started in the 1800s, but just proliferated through the 50s because that's when salaries started just going skyrocketing in new areas, is changing. And we're going to have to reconsider, what is work really? How do you view this? Because we're going to be much more creative as a people, and we have to be available to have that capacity to think bigger and to do things. I mean, think about the possibilities with AI, like how fast you can solve a new virus that comes because you've got all of history at your disposal. And you type in, hey, look, what in the past, whatever, what combinations can we use to kill these things? And it can help produce all these. That's awesome, right?
That is awesome. Well, I would argue too that that gets into kind of the definition of success, how you define it. That gets into what and how you consider things to be productive, because they've come to find now that there's more work from home employees that the productivity levels are higher when you work less. There's even studies where if you were to work straight through for an hour and then you took an hour off and then you went back for 15 minutes, that you can sometimes get more done in the 15 minutes because of the way you structured your productivity than you would have if you would have worked all day.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing is like, I think a lot of people have this mixed up idea that you have to work really hard to be successful, or you have to work really hard to create more opportunities for yourself, or you have to work really hard to become a millionaire, whatever it is. But if you go talk to really successful people, they're busy, but they're also sitting on their yacht. Like,
and great point. And they've also figured out that the idea is you can't be successful by yourself, right? You have to delegate. You have to have all these other teams that do things for you. And I think one of the secrets to success is something that you said a second ago and that we've been talking about, is having focus. You need to be focused on what you're doing. That is like one of the biggest things there. Do you have to kill yourself night after night after day after day? Maybe. I don't know what you're into. Like if you're a surfer, yeah, you probably got to surf 16, 17 hours a day sometimes to get everything right. If you're a gymnast, like, yes, because you got to perfect your body. But if you're in the business world, it's a different environment. And especially as you go up, you get paid less to actually work and more to think. And I think that flipping on its head is what's causing so much disruption, because people are realizing, oh, crap, we may not need people to build crap anymore. We probably need you to think more and do different things. And that is going to be the tipping point, I think, where a lot of people are going to go, yes, I'm all in, or wait, you want me to think? What? Hang on a second. Hang on. And I think especially this culture divide between the baby boomers, the Gen X's, the millennials, all these different, that's where this change is going to be the hardest to digest, because I'll tell you right now, millennials, boom, they're in. They got this. They're in. Gen Y, they get this. They're like, yes, this is where we're going. My parents are, baby boomers. And I'll tell you right now, this is not their world. Like, they want none of it. They are terrified of it. They think it's easy. And I'm like, well, look, okay, so we create a ton of content, meet with tons of people, do all these things. I'm busy all day, just like you are. And you're doing a million things. So you mean to tell me that's not being as productive? I would argue that's not only more productive, it's actually adding more value to society at the end of the day than sitting behind and being, you want to stare at an Excel spreadsheet all day. Why would you do that? Like, human beings are not meant to do that. If you look at our bodies, the more we sit, the sooner we die. Like, we're meant to move. We're meant to be up. We're meant to be doing things. We're meant to be engaging with people. And so I think that is what hopefully will be this renaissance or rebirth of all this cool stuff.
I think it's going to give people more of that work-life balance, because that's why I talk about the mindset part of it. Your mindset when it comes to the way you define success, the way you define productivity, not only changes the way that you go about doing your actual work, but it changes the way you view money. It changes the way you view hanging out with family and your friends. It changes all of those things. And especially entrepreneurs, we really, I think, have this issue where we're constantly fighting between that entrepreneurial side and the balance of having family time, having self time. That's important. Most people don't make time for that. Trying to find that balance is hard because we have it in our mind that we have to consistently be doing A, B, and C a certain way. And I think that's part of the issue here is this is going to help redefine that in a way where we're going to go, okay, instead of trying to work to be busy, maybe I should work to be productive. Maybe instead of working to work and be successful, part of that success is actually having downtime, being able to travel, going and actually being able to experience everything the human experience has to offer. I mean, there's so many places to travel. There's so many different cultures to see, so many different foods to try. And we miss out on all that because we're so hyper fixated on, I have to be successful. I have to work. I have to do this. What about family time? What about, hey, I want to sit and read a book. When's the last time you've done that? When have you actually been able to sit down, read a book and finish it? This is going to give you the time to do that.
Absolutely. And I actually thought about this weekend because Kelly's obviously an avid reader. I don't think I've ever actually sat down and read a book cover to cover in one day, ever. That sounds pretty exciting to me. But also, the flip side of that is like, oh crap, like, could I actually do that? Yeah. It's that like, it's kind of balancing that like, oh wow, that's so exciting to me. But mentally, am I ready to do that? Because I've always been kind of like the hustler, like that next. And I think that your point is very, very valid. And also just something for everyone to digest, the fact that not only our definition of work needs to change, our quality of life is going to change, but also realize that at the end of the day, how we interact with everyone's going to change as well. Because if this gives us more time to do those things, think about the possibilities. You could spend a month in Australia if you wanted to. Why not? Right? We're all connected now. Everything's Wi-Fi. You can go in the middle of Africa. They have 5G. I mean, more so than even in my neighborhood in some parts, like it's crazy. So why aren't we taking more advantage of this? And I hope that this revolution that we're having here and all these cool things that are popping up push us to redefine what it means to be successful, what it means to work, how to balance those things and still be a productive citizen. And at the end of the day, more importantly, how to have fun with all this, how to experience, like, as you said, the human condition a few minutes ago. It's true. I don't think we appreciate the human condition a lot because a great example is like, I look at my grandparents when they were my parents' age, and my grandmother had like a bun, like a huge bun on her head. Like it was like a beehive, and it was like this perfect white coiffed hair, whatever. And she always looked old to me. My entire life, my grandmother looked like a golden girl. My mom is, I think she's 69 this year. She looks like a 50-year-old. It's very interesting, even in one generation, what that look is like. And so I think that separation of like all of that she's done to take care of herself, all the different things, I can't imagine what I'm going to look like and my kids are going to look like to their, like, what does old actually look like? And I think that work-life balance will help with all that so that we re-envision all this stuff so we don't look like golden girls when we're 60, Love
that. Well, it's funny and it's kind of interesting too, because I have kind of 3 points to that. So the first thing I would say is they've done studies where people who are in very high stressful jobs have a tendency when they retire to be at higher risk of having heart attacks because their body is in such a constant state of stress that when they come out of that situation, one of two things happens. Either their body goes, oh, I can finally relax and starts shutting down, or their body gets more stressed out because it's like, what the hell is this? You want me to relax? What is that? And I will tell you that when I was younger, when I first moved to LA, everyone talks about wanting to sit on the beach there because it's not too hot, it's not too cold half the time. Yeah. I could not for the life of me do that. It would give me such horrible anxiety to sit in one place for any period of time. And it took me a long time to figure out why that was. And it was because when I was in Los Angeles, I was at my peak of overworking myself. I was at that peak of like, I got to do this. I got to, that mindset of like, I got to hustle. Sitting in one place, sitting on the beach gave me mad anxiety because I felt like I should be doing something else and that I was being unproductive by sitting there. it took me a long time to realize that that is not healthy, number one. Number two, you're not going to be as productive and creative when you're in that state of mind, because the majority of your creative ideas come when you're bored. They come when you are not stressed out. That's why when people are living these stressful lives, it becomes hard to write. It becomes hard to come up with ideas. It becomes hard to do all these things because they've shown that stress literally will make your brain act as if you've been in a physical trauma. It does the same type of things because your emotions and everything are so tied into your body that when you have anxiety and worry over things, you actually go through it as if it's actually happening. They've done studies where if you are meditating on how to do something, you will learn it 10 times faster when you go to actually do it than somebody who doesn't. So if I were to meditate on learning the piano, I can learn the piano faster than you would be able to do, more than likely, if you haven't done that. Your mindset and the way that you approach everything is so like tied into everything that it's kind of mind blowing. And it took me a long time to figure out that balance of, okay, now we calm down. Now we come up with ideas. We meditate. We do these things. You reduce your stress levels and not making that stressful.
Yeah. So yes. And like, here's a great example. So Tai Chi, it is slow down Kung Fu. And it's one of those things that is my freshman year of college. I had to take an elective. I'd never even heard of Tai Chi before because of my scholarship. I had to take some sort of elective thing, an art. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll take Tai Chi. It was the best, like to this day, it was some of my favorite class I ever took. And at first, it took me probably a month or so to get into it because I didn't understand the concept of slowing down. And then basically after probably 6-7 weeks, Sensei showed us like, okay, come at me, and showed how fast all those movements work because you've digested it. It's so ingrained in your muscle memory that you never have to practice it again, that if a situation ever arises, you're prepared for it. And compared to normal karate or Krav Maga or whatever you want to practice, it's one of the more actual longest lasting ones because it's so ingrained in you. You have to practice it so precisely at such a slow speed that when you ever need it, it's just there. And it was, to me, kind of that first realization of, all right, maybe I should slow down. Maybe there's something to be said here. And that's when I really fell in love with a lot of just ancient teachings and stuff, because a lot of it is, I mean, very rarely do you ever read Socrates and he goes, you got to get your shit together and you got to have it together by age 14. And not only do you have to have it together by age 14, you better know how the world works. You better know how commerce, you better be able to be an accountant, a lawyer, and a doctor all at once, maybe by 16. No, they all say, take it slow, have discussions, engage with people, provide provocative comments, get people thinking, and magic happens when that's there. One of my favorite examples of the highest stress for me was when I first was working, and I literally, after 2 weeks, got promoted to be proposal manager. We had a proposal due to the government in 6 months, and everybody would work till midnight. They'd come in at 6 a.m. and work till midnight, and I would not. I'd show up at 8, leave at 4 every day. And people would get furious with me. How can you do this? Da, da, da. And I'd show everything that I accomplished and stuff. And I'd be like, look, I don't want to stay. My job is not to converse and commiserate with you. My job is to be a leader and to get this thing done. And we got it in on time, and you've heard the rest. But the point of it was, that's when I started realizing what most people think of as work and how they operate and what they do is counterintuitive to your health and to what this podcast is called. It's how you fully execute.
True. I think part of it too is that we kind of forget that just because we're succeeding in one area doesn't mean that the other areas are on pause. I think a lot of people who want to be successful, part of the reason why they have those ambition is wrong way again. I can never. Zoom makes, okay, so for those of you who cannot see, we always try to high five, but everything's backwards. And for some reason, I always want to go the opposite way. Oh, except this one time I raised my hand. There we go. Got it right that time. Boom. But I think we forget that we are not going to put these other areas on pause. If you are really trying to be successful because you want that freedom of financial flexibility and freedom of time so that you can spend more time with your family, what about all the time that you had when you were fighting to be successful? It doesn't get put on hold. You come to find that, years go by in a blink of an eye and you went, well, shit. The amount of time I spent trying to be successful and putting these other things on pause, it wasn't on pause. I missed out. And if you take all that time from the rest of your lifetime in which you could have spent that time, even if you get to where you want, by the time you get there, you still would have spent more time if you would have just done it from the get.
100%. And here's an advice to anyone out there who's struggling with this, right? You're listening to this podcast going, all right, I kind of hear this, but I don't know if I can do all this, right? You tossed a bunch of shit at me. We're talking AI, we're talking culture, we're talking times changing. What is going on here? To embrace time more, what I had to do was I started volunteering years and years ago. I don't know how long ago, a couple times a year. And I want to do it more and more. And what those experiences teach you, any of them. I've been everything from like a docent at a zoo to helping kids pack lunch, all that kind of thing. Like they all teach you one thing, that it's a lot more fun when you're having fun. And when you're doing something that is giving, you feel so good after going to charity. And I started thinking like, what if work was like that? Like, what if we all felt this way? And I think that that's where we've kind of lost our way in a lot of ways, is that we treat work as this prescriptive. This is what you do. I am an accountant. I am a doctor. I am a lawyer. I am a life coach. I am an editor, whatever it is. The human experience isn't one thing. When you go back in time, philosophers weren't just philosophers. Some were doctors. Some were actual lawyers. I mean, there were all these different things. And so I think the more we appreciate and we take the time out to embrace what we enjoy, go after those things, and understand that it's more about the experience. It's more about what you're giving and what you're providing value for and what you're focusing on. It's at the end of the day what matters the most. And most truly, if you want to, we all have different definitions of success, is what we've talked about here. But like, to me, I'd love to be on a yacht somewhere, right? That's kind of the lifestyle I would love, and know that I've provided so much value that I can now take a month off and go on a Caribbean or Mediterranean cruise or whatever, and have no guilt about it. And I think that aspiration for me, the more I look at that, the more it becomes, okay, I've got to do this, this, and this in a different way, because I've got to be able to take advantage of that later in life. So I have to focus on the moment now, providing more value and enjoying every step along the way, so that when that happens, I can truly embrace it.
I agree with everything you said. And I think part of it is, when we think about reciprocity, we think about relationships. Oh, the relationship's got to be reciprocal. True. But what I think we forget is we also have to have a reciprocal relationship with ourselves, in the sense of how much we give and how much we receive. And it's the same with money. You have to have a reciprocal relationship with money. You have to have a reciprocal relationship with your friends. You have to have a reciprocal relationship with all these different aspects of your life. And I think trying to find that balance and that reciprocity in all these areas is part of figuring out the key to that balance and being able to maintain it. It's going to evolve as you evolve. And I think that's okay.
Absolutely. And I think as we summarize today, what a great episode again. This was I think this is probably our deepest one yet. We covered a ton of stuff. And for me, it's almost cathartic. Like, I love talking about this stuff. I like debating it. I like diving down these little areas, because hopefully it gave everyone else something to think about, but also gave them a new way to appreciate all these things that are going on in your life, and how to take more advantage of it, and realize that success isn't one thing. It's a million different things, because like you had said earlier, you can be successful in your health, but if your finances are failing, well, what is that? You've got to balance all these things. So let's figure out what success is in all areas of your life. Keep listening.
I'm so excited to be able to dive into more of these topics and to give people a different perspective, and to get a different perspective from you, because we've both dropped, as you like to say, some bombs.
Now, see, this is where AI could go wrong, though, right? We say the word bomb and we may get flagged by the CIA or something. You know what I'm saying? Wait, did they just say bomb? What are they bombing? What's going on? Da, da, da. Not that kind of bomb. It's a knowledge bomb. All right, AI, if you're listening and you're scanning the airwaves right now, we are talking about knowledge bombs. They don't hurt people. In fact, they make their lives better.
Maybe we should call them little nuggets, like you said earlier.
See, we've learned here. We have learned. Look at this. We're using technology to our advantage. We're learning the right words to use. We are adapting to our situation.
Well, Justin, as they say, all good things must come to an end.
Alas, they must. However, this isn't the end, because next week, same time, same channel, we drop another episode.
So So get excited because we're going to be diving deeper into all the topics of the not so subtle truth about success and
the art of sucking less in the pursuit of it. So join the conversation below and don't forget to subscribe.